Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down, back in for some more TV talk. Like I said, last review for The Queen's Gambit. If you haven't checked that out, you can check it out right there. But as I said in that review, I kind of took my foot off the gas, took a little break outside of The Mandalorian. Mandalorian, never going to miss that coverage, but need a little recoup after October. And now we're diving back into all the reviewing of things that I was watching during that little gap, where I was kind of taking a little mini break. And we're going to keep it rolling in the world of television, because I watched another Netflix series after The Queen's Gambit that I was very excited about. Said so in my trailer reaction to this show. It's coming from Ryan Murphy, starring Sarah Paulson. Two things I love, and specifically two things I love together. And a character that I was like, oh, this is prime for something really interesting. And then Ryan Murphy gave us something interesting. So why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler-free, into Netflix's Ratchet. I don't even know where to start with this one. It's like I said, this is probably, if Queen's Gambit is my favorite show of the year, we move from that to the show I like have the most conflict about. When I heard that Ryan Murphy was going to do a prequel series about the origins of Nurse Ratched, Nurse Ratched, of course, from the phenomenal Oscar-winning film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, an Oscar winner in Louise Fletcher, who played Nurse Ratched back in the day. I got very excited because Nurse Ratched is an interesting character who we only get to spend a little bit of time with in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But like I said, spend more than enough for Louise Fletcher to knock it out of the ballpark and win herself an Oscar. So I was excited because I love what Ryan Murphy does, particularly with American Horror Story, and I love what he does when he teams up with Sarah Paulson. So I was like, this could work. And I was like, Sarah Paulson, she could totally be a young Nurse Ratched. And then we saw that trailer, and the trailer got me psyched, even though some of the things that were going on, and I'm like, I don't know if that's really exactly what I would expect from Nurse Ratched, but like, maybe in the process of getting to what we knew in the movie, maybe that instance could be fun, but definitely, should produce content that I'm like, bring me in, let me know more. And what I can say about Ratchet is I hate to kill Ryan Murphy, but this feels like a show where Ryan Murphy's like, I got this idea. We could do this. How are we going to get people to watch this show besides just me and Sarah Paulson's names being on it? I know, let's just grab a name from a famous character and throw it in here, because this show does not resemble or feel at all like Nurse Ratched. I'm not going to lie to you. The show does not resemble the character that we know from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And when you hear things like Ryan Murphy and Sarah Paulson didn't talk to the Oscar-winning actor who played the character originally, and then I saw what we saw, I was like, yeah, man, this just feels like he pulled Nurse Ratched to put it on the show to get eyes to look at it, because the character, like I said, doesn't really resemble Nurse Ratched whatsoever. I mean, one, she's a bit of a glamour queen, which certainly never anything I got from Nurse Ratched. Nurse Ratched, who's so stringent on the rules. In this show, this character, while she doesn't physically commit murder herself, certainly doesn't seem to need to abide by rules or laws. It's one of those things where going into it, I wanted a Nurse Ratched show. I did not get a Nurse Ratched show. Now, that being said, that is its ultimate detriment. It's a detrimental aspect of the show. You have a famous character, a well-beloved character, like people who fans would be interested in seeing more about, who could have a really interesting origin. That's not what you get here. This feels like, a Ryan Murphy show where he was like, hey, let's just make this Nurse Ratched. Now, like I said, that being said, if you can look at this as a standalone piece, not as a Nurse Ratched origin, it's actually pretty good. It's fairly entertaining. The performances are wonderful. It is shot beautifully. It is one of them things, man, where Ryan Murphy is just every frame of this show is gorgeous. You could probably hang it up on your wall somewhere. It's just not a Nurse Ratched show. And what I will say is there are moments in the show that kind of hit the mark. We see, before we see Ratchet in that yellow dress that we see in the trailer, we see a moment right before that. And in that moment, I was like, oh, there's the character I'm looking for. And occasionally in Paulson's face and some of the things she does throughout the show, I'm like, there's elements of her in there. Like, you could see how Sarah Paulson would be a really, really good Nurse Ratched. And the show technically takes place like a decade or so before One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So maybe if Ryan Murphy gets 3, 4, 5 seasons, I know he's already got season 2, maybe the character grows and gets to a place where she looks and feels exactly like the Nurse Ratched we know. And if that's what Ryan Murphy is doing, kudos. Kudos. If we get there by the end of this whole series, if Murphy's able to see his vision all the way through, and it actually builds to a character that is what we knew from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, then I can forgive you for season 1 of Ratchet. So that said, I got to talk about what we get content-wise. And like I said, from a production standpoint, Ryan Murphy knocks this bad boy out the ballpark. And while I think a lot of people will be like, people who don't like the show will be, it's just another American Horror Story, basically. I understand there's definitely American Horror Story elements at work here. Murphy has a very particular style and vibe to the way he does things. But this one feels a little bit different. And one of the things that really differentiates it from Horror Story is the transitions. How Murphy gets from one thing to the next, and how he plays with the screen, man. He moves in boxes and wipes and all these different transitions that totally give it its own style and own flair, and totally are really, they're not gimmicky. Like, it flows in a way that I was like, I really enjoyed that. Anytime you could wipe to something or have one of these cool transitions or bring 3 boxes in where you're seeing 3 different characters do something at one time, or the same character from 2 different perspectives, I really liked that stuff. From a composition standpoint, it was a really clever way to stand apart from American Horror Story, which doesn't do those things, and give it its own flair. And outside of Hotel, I don't know if Murphy has really ever had a set piece like he has with Ratchet. The Hospital is phenomenal. And let me be clear, this is not the hospital for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We are not in Oregon yet, we're in California. So Murphy gets to design and create something that's completely his own, and it's gorgeous. It fits the time period, it fits the vibe, and it allows for him to play with the set and the different vibes, whether it's at the hospital or at the motel that Ratchet lives in, which is like up on this cliff overlooking the water. Really gives you an idea of where you are up toward like more northern California, out by I want to say up closer toward, I believe, Monterey. I think they referenced Monterey at one point, but you're really able to get some really, really interesting looking set pieces and just stuff that dazzle. And the way that he uses those sets, the way they play into the story, whether you're in one of the whether you're in the doctor's office, you're in the nurse's wing, you're in the cafeteria, like I said, you're at this motel. Just where you are and how Murphy plays with all those things work really well in the context of the show. And ultimately, I think Murphy writes something that is entertaining. The storyline is really interesting. The way, all the motivations for Nurse Ratchet's character, or we'll just say the motivations for Sarah Paulson's character, because I don't know if I can call her Nurse Ratchet yet, really work. I thought they were interesting, and the connections to one of the things, one of the other people that are in the show, and how that plays into what she's doing, and how they grow the character just in season 1. I liked that story and the story of this hospital, and specifically its doctor, played by John Briones, Dr. Richard Hanover. I liked his story and how that played into Ratchet's story, and just this little the story that he writes is really interesting. And yes, there are some American Horror Story elements to it. These one-off little stories that kind of tie into the overarching, but it all flows. And like I said, it's fairly entertaining. And There are really, really good performances in this one. You can't deny that Sarah Paulson knocks what she was given out of the ballpark. And like I said, one of the things that really rubbed me the wrong way a little bit going into this show was hearing that Paulson, specifically Paulson, not even Murphy, but Paulson, didn't think it would make sense to reach out to Louise Fletcher to get some insight. But like I said, when you see this story and where it takes place and how this story plays out, I don't think asking Fletcher for any advice on Nurse Ratched really would have helped here, because this character is not that. Maybe if they get the character closer to that, you hear Sarah Paulson reach out to her, because it certainly felt like they were trying to create something different that maybe builds to that character, and having that influence early, maybe that wouldn't have worked for what they did here. It's just not what we were expecting, I don't think. And I think Paulson does a really good job with what she's given. She, as always, is captivating when she's on screen, and the different elements of her character and some of the places she goes and things that she's dealing with, I like her execution a lot, and she really does make the character her own. Again, it just doesn't feel like the character we're looking for, but I love the style that they give the character. It suits Paulson quite well. Paulson delivers really riveting moments throughout the whole series, and the different relationships she has with different characters, I kind of like some of those elements. Could certainly play into things that lead to a character that looks like Ratchet, but to this point, not really. But like I said, with what she's given and what the show ultimately is, I think she does a good job. Finn Wittrock crushes it. Love his character. Love what his character does. Love what his character is. And love how they play with his character. He is one of these people who's brought to the hospital to be studied because he committed a massive crime. And that crime has landed him here until they can, they basically need a doctor to decide his mental state, essentially to know if they can put him in give him the death sentence or not. And the way Wittrock plays the character, he gets to have a ton of fun. He gets to be batshit crazy. There is a moment where he is breaking down something that he's going to do, and you're seeing what a fictional future could be, and what he does in that scene, you're just like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Like, I love that. And like, you can tell he's having a ton of fun with that. And then the more darker areas of the character, I just like the places that Wittrock goes. And again, someone else that's very familiar to Murphy from that American Horror Story group, that just really knows how to pop in what Ryan Murphy does with him. So I loved what Finn Wittrock had to do. Cynthia Nixon, who comes in to play a character named Gwendolyn Briggs. She's kind of an associate to the governor, I believe, and there's, because of Wittrock's character's legal affairs, she kind of gets played in, and what her character means to the character of Ratchet is something that could be very interesting as far as playing into a character that maybe one day gets to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But what she does is stuff that she's really good at. She's a hard ass. She is basically the person who runs a lot of this governor's life and is whole rigmarole. And she has a very interesting relationship to Nurse Ratched, and their relationship is weird. Like it's like a bipolar relationship, at least for Ratchet. The way Ratchet swings from like one side of things over here to then another side of things over here and back and forth. It's a really up and down kind of crazy relationship. And Nixon does the best she can, I think, to helm that into something that she's really good in. Nixon does feel a little out of place mixed in with these other characters, but what she means to the Ratchet character produces a role that I think she does really, really well with. But for me, if there is someone who pops, and maybe pops even more than Sarah Paulson does, Judy Davis is freaking phenomenal as Nurse Betsy Bucket, who's the head nurse when Ratchet gets there, and they kind of have a contentious relationship that then also becomes somewhat of a friendly relationship to a degree. They kind of have to find a common playing ground, and watching them kind of juggle that relationship back and forth on screen is fun, and Betsy Davis just has a ball with the character. Bucket's got a lot of interesting quirks going on to her, and she really shines. Like that scene in the kitchen that we saw, or in the cafeteria that we see in the trailer, where she's like, well, I didn't see your name on the peach. And Ratchet's like, who would write their name on a peach? And Davis is like, someone who wanted to eat the peach. Like, that stuff, she just sinks her teeth into and really delivers a fun character. Then you also have, as I mentioned, John Briones, who plays Dr. Richard Hanover. Love Briones. It's one of those things where you hear Richard Hanover, I'm like, I don't know if I'm buying that as the character. And as the series progresses, you understand some more about him, and Briones is awesome. He's this doctor who kind of has a drug addiction, so he plays with different drugs, so he has these really interesting moments. One of the other things that Murphy does I love in the show, and it doesn't always necessarily mean anything, but like every so often you'll be in a situation where the lighting goes one solid color. There's a couple times where just green happens. There's a couple times where red happens. And what green and red mean in those sequences are what they're kind of alluding to. I like the way Murphy plays with that. And a lot of the red sequences are around Hanover when he's freaking getting hopped up on whatever he can get his hands on. But his character is really interesting. He has a lot of depth, and his emotional range is really big. He can be this doctor who sounds like a guy who's on the verge of bringing medicine to the next place it's going, to sounding like an absolute crackpot. He sounds like a quack sometimes, and he really has fun with those. But then he can also break your heart when you find the roots to his story and where he's coming from and why these things that are happening around him in the hospital are starting to happen. You feel for him too, and Briones really does a good job of navigating all these different interesting places that they take Hanover as a character. And there's a lot of interesting things going on with Hanover as a character, and there's a lot of twists and turns in everybody's story, and I like the way they all kind of mesh together. So I really enjoyed what he did. Charlie Carver, who again is another alum of American Horror Story, plays Huck Finnegan, who is a scarred war vet who is one of the male attendants at the hospital. And God, man, like, again, just one of those people where Carver, you just have such a soft spot for him, and he plays this character in a way where you really have a soft spot for him. Because, I mean, let's face facts, Charlie Carver's a good-looking dude, and they scar up his face to make him a non-good-looking dude. And the way he plays with that, like, he's a hero, he's a veteran, but the disfigurement on his face really affects him as a character, and there are elements of him that kind of make him hesitant for certain things, and I really enjoyed watching him play with all of those things that they give him. It's a really minor role that has some major moments, and I just always enjoy Carver. And then last but not least, Sharon Stone comes in to play a crazy, rich, extravagant woman whose son was mixed up in something that Hanover did that went wildly wrong, and she is out to get homeboy. And she's crazy. She plays crazy really well, and she's... I don't know. Like, I like that element of Hanover's story, and we just get a little bit of Stone, but she is very over the top, which is why I guess a little bit of her works quite well. But she does have some really nice moments, specifically with Paulson, and also with Corey Stoll, who pops up in this for a little bit. He's an interesting character. He's kind of like a neighbor to Ratchet at the motel, and their relationship is very interesting. There's some really weird stuff going on with the two of them, and again, one of those storylines that kind of weaves and twists and turns in ways where it's like you need that character to kind of hit some of these interesting moments. And Stoll is just solid as he always is. And last but not least, I almost freaking forgot, Vincent D'onofrio, another Netflix alum, pops up in here. He plays the governor, George Wilburn, and he's the perfect guy to play a governor of California, man. Like, and a governor of California that wants to, like, execute a dude. I love D'onofrio, and you can tell he's having an absolute ball with this character during it, and he is an absolute dick, and he's so good at it. So look, you have really good performances here. You have really good set design, production design, wardrobe design. It's just not a Nurse Ratched show yet. Like I said, I think is some potential for what comes in season 2. I think there are some moments where you're like, the Ratchet I know is in there, we just haven't found her yet. And it's hard to praise a show that diverts so much away from the character that we knew and that we were hoping to see beginnings of. However, I hold reservations that if Murphy is able to bring this bad boy home and get us to a place where this character becomes the character from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you might be able to look back at season 1 and go, all right, now I understand what you're doing, Murphy. So I can't kill it. I can't praise it. What I can say is, as a Nurse Ratched show, not very good. As a standalone Ryan Murphy show, very good. I like I said, I thought it was very entertaining, very easy to watch, and very easy on the eyes. Really good performances. What Murphy is known for. And while Murphy sometimes can struggle with endings, I thought where he took the show toward the end, like I said, set up some really interesting things for next season. It's just not a Nurse Ratched show yet. It's weird, but if you want to give it a go, you'll be entertained until maybe it becomes a Nurse Ratched show one day. So there you go, man. Those are all the Seaman's non-spoiler thoughts as the sun goes down and I lose all my natural lighting to do a review. I apologize. I'll try to brighten this up as I edit it. I wasn't expecting the sun to disappear before 5 o'clock today. And while it's still out, I didn't think it would be this dark in the room. So there you go, man. I'm all done. I'm going to stop talking. Now I know what you're thinking. Have you watched Ratchet? Do you think this is a Nurse Ratched show? Do you think this is more of a standalone Ryan Murphy property with Ratchet just kind of attached to it? Do you think that the show could become a Nurse Ratched show? Did you see moments of an actual Nurse Ratched in Paulson? Like I said, there are glimpses of that character, like in brief moments, but overall, yeah. So does that make this show work or not work for you? Like if you were coming in and hoping for a Nurse Ratched show and you got this, did it stink for you? Or were you able to go, okay, Murphy's not doing what we thought he was going to do. Let's go on this ride and enjoy the ride that we're on. Anywhere you land, good, bad, or indifferent on Ratchet, down below in the comments section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the Seaman anytime we're talking movies, TV, trailers, you want to be here for all that action, jump over there. Hit that subscribe button. Come join the C-Maniac Nation, and then hit that little bell if you want those alerts so you can know right when I drop things on the old YouTube. But that's it, man. You do all those things for me. I'm going to keep cranking on some content for you. We'll turn some lights on as well. Until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema, sit down. I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace.
Well, that's all live and breathe. You still here? Check out a video like this one or this one and hit the subscribe button so you can get alerts and check out everything the Seaman's got at the Cinema Sitdown.